Okay, let's just dive right into it. If you're a fleet manager, you already know that a serious rear end crash is, well, it's pretty much one of the most terrifying phone calls you can get. And a big reason for that is because it always looks like it came completely out of nowhere, right? Traffic is flowing perfectly fine until bam, suddenly it's not. But is it actually as sudden as it seems? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to take a really close look at how we can spot those early safety risks way before they turn into a catastrophic event. We're going to completely change how you look at your fleet data. So here is a pretty harsh reality we have to face. In those final panicked seconds of a crash, a driver literally only has a split second to recognize what changed, figure out what to do, and somehow make a massive, heavy truck respond. In that exact instant, space vanishes, reaction time completely disappears. And as the source material for today brilliantly puts it, the road does not care how good the paperwork looked the day before. Having perfect, flawless compliance on paper, that means absolutely nothing in the actual seconds right before an impact. You know, right after a crash happens, the investigation almost always zeroes in on this final few seconds. People ask, was the driver tired? Were they looking at their phone, following too closely? And hey, those are absolutely fair questions, but they probably aren't where the story actually started. So here's the absolute crucial takeaway. We've got to rewind a clock. Because when someone starts working backward through a carrier's records, a sudden crash often doesn't look quite so sudden anymore. The records were likely already talking. The real question is, was anyone actually listening? To help us become proactive risk detectives, here's our roadmap for today. 1. Rewinding the sudden crash. 2. Shrinking space and following distance. 3. Legal hours versus real margins. 4. When minor friction means more. 5. The danger of clustered alerts. And 6. Connecting dots before the crash. All right, let's get into section 1, rewinding the sudden crash, getting into that detective mindset and looking backward. When you do that detective work and uncover the timeline, man, a pattern really starts to emerge. Think about it. 30 days out, a super tight delivery window gets slapped on the schedule. 15 days out, things get a little heated and a tense dispatch message is sent. 5 days out, your telematics trigger a close following alert. And then, at day 0, the hard-breaking crash actually happens. These issues, the shrinking space, the divided attention, the mounting pressure, the fatigue, they do not just appear out of thin air. They leave tracks. And as fleet managers, you need to be actively hunting for those tracks. Moving on to section 2, shrinking space and following distance, our first major warning sign. Following distance isn't just some regulatory rule to check off. It's literally one of the absolute simplest safety margins a driver has out there on the highway. When that space cushion disappears, everything else gets squeezed. There is suddenly way less time to respond to traffic backing up or construction zones or a sudden downpour or, somebody in a tiny car making a really terrible decision 2 vehicle lengths ahead. When the space goes away, the margin for error just instantly drops to 0. So here is where fleets honestly make a pretty big mistake. A lot of carriers just sit around waiting for a massive hard-breaking event before they start paying attention. The dramatic camera clip comes in, and suddenly everyone wants to have a serious talk. But we need to be looking at the pre-crash indicators that build up first. The close following alerts, the forward collision warnings, moderate braking, lane alerts, near misses and heavy traffic. Now, obviously, you can't treat every single ping like a full-blown confession. Drivers live in the real world, and traffic is just a reality. But when these alerts start clustering and showing up more often, that's the data screaming at you that the driver's space cushion is shrinking well before they ever slam on the brakes. Let's look at section 3, legal hours versus real margins, the ELD versus reality. A perfectly legal trip on paper might fit the hours of service clock absolutely flawlessly. But, and this is huge, being legal does not automatically mean the trip was actually well planned. In the real world, a driver is battling traffic, nasty weather, awful detention times at a slow shipper, and the nightly nightmare of finding parking. A driver can be technically 100% legal on their log, but out there running with basically 0 margin. In real life, that trip might be held together entirely by stress, a little bit of luck, and a clock that just keeps ticking louder and louder. And hey, we definitely need to pause and show some empathy for our dispatchers here. Dispatch basically lives right in the eye of the storm every single day, just trying to keep demanding customers happy and drivers moving. Most of the pressure in trucking isn't caused by one bad person. It just builds up quietly through customer demands and normal operational strain. So the question you've got to ask yourself as a fleet manager isn't just, was the driver legal? The much better question is, did the way we planned this trip actually leave enough room for the real world? Because if it didn't, a driver's focus is naturally going to start narrowing just to survive the schedule. Okay, section 4, when minor friction means more. Warning sign number 3. Friction is essentially what happens when a driver suddenly gets a lot harder to reach. Dispatch messages get super short, maybe a little sharp. Log corrections start becoming way too frequent. Or maybe you get unusual pushback during what should be a routine coaching chat. It is so incredibly easy on a busy Tuesday to just chalk this up to them having a bad week and move on. But if a usually steady, reliable driver suddenly starts showing these small friction points, it's very often a red flag for a thinning mental margin. Maybe they're completely burned out, or actually, maybe the route itself just got changed and it's stressing them out. Before jumping straight to discipline, someone needs to step up and ask a genuine question. Hey, what changed? Section 5. The danger of clustered alerts. When small things pile up. Herein lies a totally massive vulnerability for fleet managers: data fragmentation. It's like a giant puzzle where all the pieces are kept in different rooms. A speeding alert sits over in telematics. The ELD correction is handled by some specific compliance person. The grumbling dispatch complaint stays hidden in operations notes. The roadside inspection gets filed away somewhere else entirely. Everybody is touching their own single piece of the puzzle, but nobody is seeing the whole picture. And the worst part, it usually isn't until a serious crash actually happens that all these separate, siloed records are finally dumped onto the exact same table. That is a really, really terrible time to suddenly discover a pattern. So once you do actually gather all that data together, you have to play detective again and separate the root causes. Think about it like this. If one single driver is getting close following alerts across totally different lanes with different customers and different dispatchers, well, that strongly points to a driver behavior issue, right? But if several different drivers all start having the exact same alerts on the exact same lane around the exact same delivery window, that points to systemic operational pressure. You absolutely have to know the difference between the two if you want to actually fix it. And finally, Section 6, connecting dots before the crash, making this actionable. I really want to let this one sink in for a second. Writing driver coached in a file is not an investigation, period. When those early warning signs show up, if your entire safety response is just typing out a generic note that says driver coached, you are almost certainly missing the bigger issue. That kind of lazy boilerplate response basically just points the finger at the driver and moves on. It entirely ignores the routing, the scheduling, or the insane customer pressure that might be forcing that driver into a bad spot in the first place. So, how do we actually fix this? How do we transition from merely having mountains of data to actually using it to prevent crashes? You follow this sequence. 1. Identify the cluster of alerts, whether it's around a specific driver, a lane, or a customer. 2. Build a simple timeline. Look back over the last 30 days and put the story in order. 3. Have a real, human conversation tied to that actual information. Ask them, hey, is this schedule creating pressure? Don't just tell them to drive better. And 4. Document the specific operational response. Did you adjust the routing? Did you push back the appointment time? You have to close the loop to prove that you actively managed the risk rather than just passively watching it happen. And that brings us to our final and honestly most critical thought for today. After a serious rear-end crash happens, the lawyers are not just going to stop at asking, what did the driver do wrong? Nope, they are going to ask, what did the carrier know and what exactly did the carrier do about it? The warning signs we talked about today, the shrinking space, the tight margins, the friction, the clustered alerts, they are probably already sitting right there in your systems. As a fleet manager, it's your job to connect those dots before someone else connects them for you inside a courtroom. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this helps you become the proactive risk detective your fleet needs.